Hey everyone, I hope that you are doing well. I am going through the different races and class combinations that you can have from the 4th edition Player's Handbook. There are 8 races and 8 classes, and not necessarily all of them fit together as well as others. You can always mix and match however you want. You have that flexibility, which is more than you can say from some of the earlier editions of D&D, but there are definitely some races that fit better with certain classes because of the ability bonuses you get from the races and the things that those classes are going to need in order to be as effective as possible. So with that said, I'm going through each of the different classes, and seeing how the races stack up and kind of ranking them to see which you would want to choose if you really wanted to optimize your build. So I've gone through a couple of the classes already, and today we're going to take a look at the Ranger and see which races would be your best bets if you're wanting to play a Ranger. And this is an interesting one. As I was taking a look at it, there's definitely a few things that you have to keep in mind here. So we'll get into that in a second. Before we get started, please do like the video. If you enjoy this, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. If I get anything wrong or you have some different opinions, I'd love to hear those comments, and check out the description for some other ways that you can support the work, either by becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, or becoming a Ko-fi member where you can get access to our Discord server, which is slowly growing, and we have more and more commentary on that channel every week, it seems. So with that said, let's go and take a look at our Ranger and see what we're working with. So with the Ranger, there are 3 key abilities that we're looking at. There's Strength, Dexterity, and Wisdom. And if we go through some of the things that we have, I was looking at the features that you get, and interestingly enough, there's not a lot in the features that will that tie directly back to those, because like you have your archer fighting style, but that gives you access to a feat. It doesn't actually do something directly with that. With your ability scores, so getting a bonus there. And then your Hunter's Quarry, similar, it lets you, gives you extra damage on a particular enemy, but again, that damage is set by this table, not by one of your ability scores. You got Prime Shot, so none of these are actually tied to your abilities, your ability score, so it doesn't directly. Now, if we take a look at I want to take a look at the feat. So defensive mobility is the feat that you get if you take the archer fighting style, and then you get toughness as a bonus feat if you take the 2-blade fighting style. So I do want to take a quick look at those. So defensive mobility and toughness. Let's take a look at our feats, and let's see what those are, just to see if either of those take into play your ability score. So defensive mobility, just a +2 bonus to your armor class. So again, not something tied to your ability score. And then toughness is, let's have a look. When you take this feat, you gain additional hit points, 5 hit points at each tier. So no, so that is not tied to your ability scores either. Now, obviously, hit points would be tied to your Constitution, but that's not one of the key abilities either. So with that in mind, I think that's just kind of gives us a little background of what we're after here. So there's not a lot that you're going to get from your ability scores for these choices in the class features here. So that kind of turns our attention to the powers themselves. And obviously, the Constitution is what impacts your hit points and your healing surges. Dexterity is going to impact your armor class. And then I think there's another one, and in your initiative, So, obviously, but dexterity is one of the key abilities. So there are other things to keep in mind, and there's things that, with skills that would come into play that you might want to consider, but where you're going to get the most value for an ability score bonus is going to be with your powers in particular. And the Ranger is really interesting because so far, when we've been looking at the powers that you have for the classes that we've looked at, it's pretty much, the power uses this, or the power uses this, or the power uses this. With the Ranger, there's a lot of powers where you have a choice because you have to decide what kind of Ranger you're going to be. And so you could be a Ranger that likes to get up there into the middle of the fight with your melee weapons and use a sword or daggers or something and attack right up close and personal. Or you can be a Ranger that's going to use ranged weapons and you're going to attack from a distance. Well, the powers for the Ranger are are set up where it's either or. So you can use a melee weapon for this power, or you can use a ranged weapon for this power. So if you are a ranger that has one of options available to you, you have melee weapons and you have ranged weapons, this power can work in either case. You don't have to choose and say, okay, I can only use the ranged powers. Like I think we saw with I can't remember which one it was, the one of the previous classes, where some of them were strength based and some of them were charisma based. And so, if you decided to lean into your strength, then you're going to more want to pick those strength based powers. And if you were going to lean into the charisma, you'd want to pick those charisma based powers. Here, you don't really have to make that choice, because you can be a ranger that is heavily on melee. You can be a ranger that's heavily on ranged weapons, or you can be a balanced one that has melee and ranged. And all of these powers or most of these powers will work just as well, because they have that option where you're using a melee or ranged weapon. So that's good to know. And with that, then you can look and see that our attacks that we get. So if you're using melee, it's going to be strength, or if you're using ranged weapon, it's going to be dexterity. And that's what we see pretty much across the board. And then for the ones that are just purely melee or ranged, they're going to be strength and dexterity. So that's clearly why those are the two most important. And that's going to be very important as you're deciding which race works best for you. So we also have strength. We've got strength or dexterity. This one uses your wisdom modifier to give a power bonus to your basic attack roll equal to your wisdom modifier for that one. So that's where your wisdom modifier is going to come into play. We got strength and dexterity. And I believe there's a couple more as we look at this, where some of the extra stuff that you get, I believe, is based on wisdom. Like this one, disruptive strike is a triggering attack equal to your add your wisdom modifier to that one. So there's not a whole lot. Here's another one that uses wisdom modifier. So some of them do take advantage of the wisdom modifier, but good to understand. Strength, dexterity are the two major ones. And then obviously if you're going to be a melee ranger, then having a higher constitution is going to be important. Possibly that dexterity will also be important, because you'll want to have an higher armor class, and the dexterity will help you with your armor class. So those are all things to factor in. The wisdom is probably a little farther down the list in what you would need to be concerned about. There are skills to take into consideration. So you can choose some of these skills, like these wisdom-based skills. You could be trained in them, which would give you a +5. And if you have more of a bonus in your wisdom ability, then that would also add to that. So if you're trying to be a ranger that has more ability to use some of the skills, that could be something you want to factor in as well. So let's head over to to our sheet, and let's start taking a look at the comparison and see what we got here. Do that. And there we go. Now we're at our sheet. So looking at this, I went ahead and highlighted strength, dexterity, wisdom. So our Dragonborn has strength, dwarf has wisdom, Ladrin, half elf has actually a couple of them, halfling has dex. So we've got a few options to choose from. So now your Dragonborn is going to have strength, but then charisma is the other one. Charisma is not one of the key abilities that you would have. That would help you with some of your skills, but you don't have a bonus to constitution. You don't have a bonus to dexterity. So you got to factor that in as something that is going to help you if you're melee, but you're going to need to maybe work with your numbers to try to get you extra constitution and dexterity, because if you're up in melee, you're going to want to have a higher constitution to get those hit points and a higher dexterity to get that armor class. Something to consider there. The dwarf is going to be just your wisdom bonus, which is not really going to get you a whole lot for, because it's only the additional stuff that you're going to get for it. So having the wisdom bonus if you don't have your strength and your dexterity to work with to even score the hit in the first place, then the wisdom bonus isn't going to add a whole lot for you. The Eladrin, not a bad choice because you're going to get that dexterity. Again, similar to the Dragonborn, it depends what kind of ranger you're trying to build. If you're trying to build a ranged based ranger, then Eladrin would be a good choice. And Eladrin hasn't had a lot of success in some of these that we've been working on. So, but you would get your dexterity again as a ranged one. Now you don't quite need as much of a bonus for your constitution, because you're not going to be up there in the battle at all. You're going to be more far away. So you don't quite need as many hit points. And the dexterity would help you with your armor class and your initiative. The elf is a good choice because you're going to cover with two key abilities here. You're going to get your dexterity and your wisdom. So if you're going to be that ranged fighter, then you would, again, same reason as the Eladrin, is going to get the dexterity, and then the wisdom is also going to give you that little extra bonus for your attacks from afar. Half elf is not going to get you a whole lot because neither one of these are key, but the constitution could help if you try to lean into your strength. Use the array to give you a bonus for your strength, and then you can use this bonus to give you a little bit of extra constitution. Halfling gets your dexterity, again, for range. So you got several options for those ranged weapons. So if you're a ranger, you got a few races that you can choose from here that would actually be pretty good. Human, we've talked about before, you can get a bonus to anything. So, you could choose strength or dexterity for that. And then the tiefling, just your intelligence and your charisma. So looking at this list, I think clearly the elf is definitely probably at the top of the list because it is going to get you your that dexterity. If you're going for the more ranged weapon type of ranger, then this is going to be the way you want to go because you're going to get the dexterity bonus that you need for those ranged attacks. It's going to get you a little bit extra for your initiative. It's going to give you a little bit extra for your armor class. So that's going to really come in handy. And then that wisdom is going to give you your extra bonuses on some of those powers if you choose those as your powers. You wouldn't need the strength as much if you're going to focus on being a character that stays more towards the edges of the battle and not the one that's going to be getting up in there into the fray. I think our tier 2 would be clearly honestly, yeah, I'm gonna do it as tier 2 is the Eladrin and the Halfling because each of those are going to get you your bonus to your dexterity, which will help because you're going to get your ranged attacks and that's great. And because you're a ranged character, you don't really need your high strength score. You don't need the higher constitution. So you've got more flexibility because you can really go all in on that dexterity. And so I think those kind of bring those into the tier 2. And the Dragonborn then would be that tier 3 because you do get strength, but without the bonus to constitution, without a bonus to dexterity, you're a character that's going to be up there getting beat on. As much as you're inflicting damage to somebody else, you're also going to be taking damage, and you need a high number of hit points, which is what your constitution is going to get you. You're going to need to have better armor class, which is what your dexterity is going to get you. So just for that reason, I would put the Dragonborn a little further down on the list because you're going to have to work harder to make that Dragonborn effective as a melee fighter when you only have that bonus to your strength. But it's still not a bad choice if that's where you want to go. And then your lower tier would be your half elf and your tiefling because those are I skipped over one. Let me move these down. I try to make a little room here. Oops. Sorry. I didn't leave myself enough room to work with. So let's skip these down. We do have a dwarf as well. The dwarf gets you your bonus to your wisdom, which will get you something. So I'll put the dwarf here because of that constitution. It's not a key ability, but if you're going to build a ranger that is a melee fighter, you can assign your ability scores to strength in a creative way, and then use that +2 bonus to your constitution to help get you the armor class that you're looking for. And then you do get that wisdom bonus to help you get some of the advantages from those powers. Now you'd want to make sure you choose those powers. If that's not where you're wanting to go with your ranger, then certainly don't choose the dwarf because it's not going to be a direct fit. So you just got to be mindful of that. I'll go ahead and throw the human in here because I don't really talk about the humans very much, but obviously if you're building a melee ranger, then you can choose strength as your top score. As a human, if you're going to do a more ranged fighting ranger, then the human you can choose dexterity. Same principle, so it works the same either way. And you could probably, someone could probably argue that a human would be as effective as some of the ones up that I've ranked above it. But I'm mostly focused on the non-human races because we're locked in to those races that we have here, or those ability modifiers that we have here. So I think that's probably where I would go with it. We could debate, some of these ones at the top, but it really depends what kind of ranger you're trying to build. Because if you're wanting a ranged ranger, then you need that dexterity, and you've got a lot of options here. The elf, the eladrin, and the halfling are going to give you that bonus to your dexterity. The elf has the advantage of it also gives you the bonus to the wisdom. So if that's where you're going with it, those are clearly your options. The dragonborn gets you your strength. So, as much as I'd want to say that you could put the dragonborn up with the same thing, but with that melee fighter, you're going to need other things to go with it. And so that's why I put it just a little bit lower. So, but that's where I think I go. I'm glad to see the eladrin again up at the top. The last one we looked at, the eladrin, I think it was a wizard. We got able to put the eladrin up a little bit higher because the first few classes we looked at, the eladrin was all the way at the bottom. It just didn't offer very much, but I'm glad that we got it pretty high here. So that is the rankings that I see for the ranger. And like I said, you've got a lot of flexibility. Ranger's a really interesting class because it has those options for the different powers of whether you want to be melee, whether you want to be ranged, whether you're going to have a mix. So you got to balance all those things, which can make building that character a little more complicated than some of the other classes that are out there. But it also makes the character more interesting because it can do lots of different things depending on what direction you want to go with it. So I hope you found that helpful. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the description for all those things. And we'll look at some other classes and do some other things along the way. But until next time, take care.